This is episode number 91, featuring Japanese-American watercolor artist Keiko Tanabe.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping. This podcast is brought to you by the PleinAir Convention and Expo. It's the world's largest PleinAir event. This year it's in San Francisco and in wine country this coming April. And we're painting in some of the most amazing, iconic places. Like imagine painting with all your friends and the Golden Gate Bridge. It's going to be incredible. We had a lot of people who discovered us through the podcast last year and came, and some had never even painted before. You're very welcome to do that. We love having you there. Everybody leaves a better painter. This year we have over 80 top master artists teaching, including some of the world's best painters ever. Probably the world's best watercolor artist, Joseph Zbukvic. Yep, he's coming into the PleinAir Convention. We've been trying to get him in there for about, 8 years. So this is the 8th annual. And also the amazing Joe McGurl, incredible oil painter, landscape painter. Both of those guys are going to be doing pre-convention workshops. They'll also both be on stage, but if you want to get a deep dive, great opportunity to do that, to get in to see Joe or Joe. And of course, we have all these painters working with you to be a better painter on stage. We got 4 different stages, indoor sessions, big screens, watercolor, oil, pastel, acrylic, demos. You've got all kinds of things going on. And then we, of course, all go painting together every day, which is a lot of fun. It's historic, and we would love to have you there. Just check it out at pleinairconvention.com. I should mention San Francisco is the most requested place for a convention that we've ever had, and so it's going to sell probably pretty fast. You might want to get that done. The interview is underwritten by our new weekly newsletter, American Watercolor. Our editor is Kelly Kane. We're very proud to have Kelly. She was formerly the editor of Watercolor Artist magazine for, 10, 20 years, something like that. She's doing a beautiful job on this new publication. She's also, thankfully, the new editor of PleinAir magazine, replacing our longtime editor, Steve Doherty, who recently retired so he can paint more. How would it be? Well, I like what I do anyway. Check it out at AmericanWatercolor.net and make sure it's .net, not .com, AmericanWatercolor.net. And after the interview, I'll be answering some art marketing questions if you're interested in the Art Marketing Minute. But let's get right to our interview with Keiko Tanabe, one of the great watercolor artists of our time. Keiko Tanabe, welcome to the PleinAir podcast.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm really excited to have you on. It's really been interesting to watch your career. It seems like you're an overnight success. I know that's not the case, but I know that it seems like every time I turn around, I'm seeing your name and I'm hearing about you and I'm hearing great things about what you're doing. So what's been happening in your career? Tell me about that.
Oh, well, overnight success. I'm just simply overwhelmed, coming from you. But it started around 2005. That's when I quit my job to become a full-time painter, and I've been painting ever since. So it's been some time, and so, but as a teacher, I teach many workshops, and I started around 2011. So that's also something on top of being an artist, being a painter that I have been doing for some time. But I started out as somebody. I'm self-taught artist, and who didn't know anything about how art world works, and even what being an artist means. That I had no idea. So I was totally lost, sort of, but I loved painting so much. So that's what I put my heart and soul into. And then, something, and I had a passion like all the other artists out there. And so that's what I've been doing. And I've been enjoying and every minute of it. So
well, no one,
all
of
the
course,
other things that I have, and yes.
no one, of course, is an overnight success, and I hope I didn't insult you by that. But it seems like we're learning more about you lately. So, what were there some specific things that really brought a lot of attention to your career? Do you think?
I think when I started out, especially, I decided one of the things, and I think I did, and many artists around me didn't, was to establish an online presence. And so I created my website, and I started to show my work constantly there. And then it didn't take a long time to get attention from other artists and also collectors. And I started selling almost immediately.
No, outstanding. So I'm curious. I want to step back to something you said at the very beginning. You quit your job to become a full-time artist.
Yes.
That's the dream of so many people, and yet I'm sure they fear it because of the insecurity of knowing whether or not they can succeed. Tell me a little bit about what you went through emotionally and how you finally came to the conclusion that you could do it, and how did you know you were ready to do it?
Oh, yes. Looking back, and I feel like, how brave I was, even though I was not reading. Look at my situation that way. Yes, it was scary to leave the security that I had, especially financially. But also at the same time, and I was already sort of preparing myself to be a full-time artist. So even though I said 2005, that's when I became an artist. But it's not really true that I was already painting. I was already selling even. So things were already happening. So I had a vague idea that maybe this might work. So, but it was a gamble. I had no idea how to make a substantial income with my art. So, but I needed to give it a try. But also I needed to be realistic. So I gave myself a year or even 2 years. I had some savings. But also I needed to borrow money in the end. But there are supportive people around me, so with their help, I was able to get started. But I wasn't sure how my art career would develop, so I gave myself 2 years and decided to, devote myself. And then I felt after that, if it doesn't work well, I thought maybe I'll get a day job and then do art on the side. But luckily, I didn't have to, so I think it worked out.
So what's your best advice to somebody who is facing that and wants to give it a go?
Well, I think everybody's situation is different, but I think to be realistic is very important. I mean, chasing a dream is something we all want to do, and I would love to encourage everybody to do that. But to make a living, that is very difficult, and then also, make a living with art. So I think first thing is money. Maybe I think it's good if you have a saving. Even I didn't think I would make any money at all with art in the first 6 months. So I had a saving for that period, and so that's one thing. And also the support system. And if you're all alone, that's extremely tough. So if you have supportive parents or spouse or even friends, and that would be a great help. And also a mentor. This is somebody I didn't have. Somebody you can ask for advice and career advice, and hopefully, and somebody who's working in the art world. So if you can find somebody like that and start talking, start getting advice, and way before you make a leap, I think those are the things that come to mind, and there may be other things, but I think those are the important things to think of at least to start with. Had
you sold any paintings before you quit your job? Did you have any indication that your paintings would sell?
Yes, I was already a member of a watercolor group locally. I live in San Diego, and they have a show every month, and I submitted my work, and then many months that I sold, and then of course the money from it was not enough to live on, but the things are already happening. And also, like I said, on online, I started selling a little bit. So from my website, and also I was a member of the online gallery. So from that too, and I had access to some of the collectors. And
Okay, outstanding. What were you doing for a living prior to quitting?
I was a marketing person. I changed the workplaces a couple of times. I started in Tokyo. And at the time, I was working for a Japanese government, trading, actually international trade ministry, and not for a long time. Then I came to the States, and I worked for, believe it or not, a law firm. But I'm not a lawyer, so this was international law firm, and I did international marketing for them. And also, I was trained as a cross-cultural trainer, and I trained attorneys actually in-house. And then after that, I set up with my colleagues and a consulting company. And there too, I was doing marketing. So that's what I did in the corporate world, and nothing about art. So being an artist is quite a big change.
So somebody who's listening to this is going to go, well, of course she's a success. She had a career in marketing. I think a lot of artists struggle with the idea of marketing. They struggle with the idea of the fact that they are offering a product. How can you help them understand some of the marketing basics, perhaps, that would be important for them to embrace?
Oh, that's everybody asks me the question. I wish I had an easy answer. Although I did marketing in my previous life, and as an artist, I had no idea how to market. And but having said that, I knew I had to spend quite a lot of time in marketing. That's something I found that some artists don't even think about. And so, in a way, I had an advantage thinking that way. So my mindset, I wouldn't mind spending time, rather I thought I needed to spend even more time marketing myself than painting. So I did that almost willingly, and so that mindset is important. I think especially if you're an artist and don't have that, don't think that way. The little switch there, and shifting gear in thinking is important. And also, if your art is a business, it's a business. So you need to have the basic tools, and starting with a business card and also the website and also even proper attire when you go to reception or opening exhibitions. And so present yourself as a professional. I think the mindset, also the way you present yourself to other people, that is very important. But the marketing, I think it changes. I think even though I haven't been a full-time artist for a long time, the trend and also the whole the landscape out there has been changing, I noticed. So you really have to adapt, and do the marketing suitable to the period of time you're living. So right now, I don't really know, Eric. It's something I tried to do in earnest in the beginning of my art career. Maybe I'm not doing it anymore. And also, yeah, and I think as an artist, and as you grow as an artist, and as you get noticed and recognized, and the way you market yourself, and it should change. So maybe that's why.
Well, I think you brought up a couple of really critical points. As you know, I teach marketing for artists, and one of the probably the basic premises is that if you spend 20% of your time in one day out of 5 days on your marketing instead of on your painting, something good will happen as a result of that. Or maybe it's 20% of your time. Maybe it's just a couple of hours a day every day. But any activity that you do is going to benefit you. Now, you can't just sit there and think. You've got to be doing something. You got to figure out ways to get yourself out there.
Right.
But I think that your mindset of being a marketing person has really kind of solidified that concept, is that you spent time on it, and so it started happening.
Yes, I think so. I was not really conscious. I didn't put a conscious effort in marketing, to be honest. But I whenever I had an opportunity to show my art, I try to do it on a professional manner. not just, like a timid artist. And of course, I was never really proud of my work, but I try to look and sound as professional as possible. So I think it's always something, mostly positive happened, whenever I put an effort in marketing.
What was it that made you decide to become an artist in the first place?
Say that again?
What was it that made you decide to become an artist in the first place?
Oh, okay. So sorry. I think it goes back to my childhood, and I always liked drawing and painting, but mostly drawing. That's what I was doing all the time. It was my favorite thing to do. So I think even then, although I was not aware, I wanted to do this as a grown-up, and I just didn't think and I would go to art school and become an artist. I didn't think that way. But, I think the desire to create or to even become a painter or to learn how to paint, I had it, as a child. And it's a very interesting thing that I had that as a child, but I sort of lost it, or maybe I didn't lose it, but I didn't really think too much of it until I became a mother about 22 years ago. And I started teaching my son when he was a toddler, something I used to enjoy as a child. So I started teaching him how to draw a dinosaur and robots and trains, and a little boy would like. And that's when I realized, how much I enjoyed this sort of thing when I was a child, and decided to take a class, and realizing I never learned how to draw properly. So I took a class at the community center, and after that, drawing class, and I wanted to paint, so I took a painting class. I was a watercolor, actually. So after those 2 classes, and I realized maybe this is something I should do more seriously, and so I decided to join the art group and the watercolor group, and then like I said earlier, and I started exhibiting, and many paintings sold, and so that sort of that made me rethink my career, and then 2005, and I decided to become an artist. So it's I think it started way back when I was a child.
You grew up in Japan, is that right?
Yes, I was born and grew up in Japan.
So culturally, what are the differences in terms of perceptions of art in Japan versus what you found in America? I have found, for instance, in some countries, especially in Europe, very much so in Russia, that they place a higher importance on art than we tend to here in America. Is it like that in Japan?
I think it depends on the person. My family, especially my father, enjoyed any form of art, and my mother too. But we would go to exhibitions and go to concerts, and every opportunity, they took us. So we were, I have 2 siblings, and we were exposed to, all kinds of art, and I'm very fortunate. But some of my friends were not like that, so maybe it depends on the family or the person. But also as a society, I think I feel the society as a whole in Japan embraces art, and so most people really appreciate it, I think. But also the type of art, it depends. And a lot of traditional forms of art, like tea ceremony, flower arrangement, and even calligraphy, and I think most people are familiar with it. But the Western art forms, that's I think it varies from person to person. My family did appreciate Western form of art as well.
Oftentimes in America, when someone announces to their family members, perhaps they're younger and it's college age or something, they announce to their family member that I'm going to become an artist, they get a lot of discouragement because there's this belief that you can't make any money as an artist, that you're going to starve. Is that pretty much the same in Japan, or is it
Uh,
held in high
well,
esteem?
I can't really speak for other people, but I think in to live as an artist, I think it's even in Japan, it's very difficult. So some parents might discourage their children and try to encourage them to look for something that is more practical, maybe.
Hmm.
So that could happen over there as well.
So you chose watercolor as your medium, and
Yes.
you
Yes.
are clearly one of the best watercolor painters I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that.
I think
It means a
that
lot to me.
there's two or three that we know are considered to be the best watercolorists in the world, and I think you're holding your own to those people. So congratulations on that. Why watercolor? What was it
thank you,
about
Eric,
watercolor
first of all.
that you chose?
Yes, it's also very interesting and story to it. And after I took a drawing class and I took a painting class, and that was watercolor, I said that to arrive at that decision, I just wanted to learn how to paint. Didn't really think about which medium, but my drawing teacher told me to pick a medium. So I tried everything. And for a short period of time, oil, acrylic, pastel, color pencil, and also watercolor. And the watercolor, ultimately I chose watercolor, but not really because I liked it the most. And when I said this, many people are surprised, but it's true. But the reason why I chose watercolor is because maybe several reasons. I've been a traveler all my life, so I was looking for something that's light and easy to travel with. So watercolor was perfect. So that's probably one of the reasons. And another thing is I did calligraphy. I practiced calligraphy when I was in Japan, not on a professional level, but as you know, the calligraphy we use paper, brush, and ink, and there's some similarities to it. And so that's maybe another reason that I chose watercolor, although I have no idea how difficult and different watercolor it is, because you get just one chance to get it right. Well, in a way, calligraphy is like that, so maybe that's a similarity. Another reason is that elusive, the quality of watercolor medium is so intriguing to me. Because you work with the water, and then you never know what would happen after you put the pigment in water, and what's going to happen next. It's so unpredictable, and so that aspect of that elusive nature of the medium is so interesting to me. And also, that was frustrating because many times I just made a mess and using watercolor. But I think I have a type of personality, that doesn't like to be defeated. I felt a total failure using watercolor, not being able to make the decent painting for many times, but I wanted to conquer it. I wanted to get the hang of it. So I think that's another reason I chose watercolor, and I'm glad I did.
Now, when you do watercolor, do you draw the image first with pencil or with ink, like some do, or do you just jump in and do it all with
For me, I need to do a drawing. But my drawing is very simple. Even a big painting, a full-sheet painting, which is 22 by 30, the time I spend in drawing is probably 5 minutes because I don't draw everything. To me, drawing is, I put the pencil marks as guidelines. So if I need to show a particular shape using a lot of contrast, a dark and light contrast, I need to mark that with my pencil. But other shapes, and if I don't really need to define or show them, or the contrast is not much, and I don't really need to draw. So I use pencil marks as guidelines for without it, I could be lost. And so if I feel that way, I put marks. And so in the most of the paintings, and I need to see some guidelines and to help me from beginning to finish. So I do draw. Yes.
And tell me about plein air painting. When did that begin for you?
Plein air painting?
Plein air painting. Yes.
Plein air. Yes, I think my very first plein air painting experiences when I was 6 years old, and of course I didn't think that I got plein air bug and got bitten by a plein air bug at the time, but maybe I did because it was a children's sketching contest, and that was just that held outside, and my parents enrolled me without, and I didn't know that's what I would be doing on that particular weekend. And they just took me out, and in the springtime in the mountains, I just loved outdoors, and so I went. And then they told me, "Oh, you're going to paint." So I did, and it was fun, and I even got an award, and the prize was like a crayon set, and I loved it. And so after that, whenever there's a contest, and children's contest, and usually outdoors, and I participated, and I got an award. And so I think I started my life as a plein air painter that way. So moving forward, and as an adult, when I started painting, and my choice of subject was landscape, maybe because I love being outdoors, and so I chose landscape so I could be outside. But anyway, for me, the painting, no matter what you paint, painting, the idea of painting from a photo didn't occur to me. So I thought, my choice is landscape, so I should be outside and painting from life, and that was a natural thing for me. So I was not really thinking I was doing something special or different from other artists. Then I found out that some the landscape artists that I got to know while using photos and painting all the time in the studio, I didn't understand. So to me, maybe it's a backward. I don't know. It's not something I started way after, and I was already doing it before I knew it. So.
Now, you said earlier that you were self-taught.
Yeah.
Is that, now that you've established yourself as an artist in a career, is that what you recommend, or would you do it differently now that you know differently?
It's yes and no. I think being self-taught, there are many reasons. And first, I couldn't afford instruction, because most of the workshops are quite expensive, at least to me at the time when I started. And also I didn't have time, and, so there are practical reasons like that. But at the same time, to learn a simple thing without a mentor, without a teacher, it took me a long time to understand. And so maybe I lost wasted time. And so I feel some kind of, the instruction, the proper instruction is necessary. And if I could start all over, I would seek that, but not too much. I think I have a way of learning that I need to do it to really get it. I need to do it myself, and so I think you need a little bit of both. And
do you have a process that you try to follow when you're painting? Most of us have some form of a process, and watercolor of course is somewhat reversed because you have to leave white out. You have to block your white spots out in advance.
Yes.
But is there, like some people will lay in their skies first, and then they'll go to they'll go furthest distance to closest distance. Some people will lay in all their darks first. Others will try to lay in their lights. What's your process like?
My typical process, I don't necessarily painting from top to bottom, and as a landscape and artist, usually I have sky on top, but I don't necessarily start from there. I do think of values first, and that's the most important thing for me. So I try to paint from light valued area first, and then I put in darks at the end. So, but usually if I don't do a night thing, which I do sometimes, sky has a light value, so it makes sense to start from there. But sometimes I start from a mid-ground or foreground, But I don't put the darkest dark from the beginning most of the time. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. So I'm working from light to dark. That's my typical way.
And what do you find? You do a lot of teaching. You do a lot of workshops. What do you find are the things that you most have to correct with students? Things that the mistakes they mostly make.
I think the values. Some students that I had, and they're very good, and they got the nice contrast in the work, and because they were able to see values correctly, and they were able to make those values correctly with the watercolor. But most students struggle, and so that's one thing. And also the beginners, especially, I think the drawing can be quite challenging. And it takes them a long time to draw, and then even after they did, and I had to correct many things, and especially one of my typical subjects, and I usually use in my workshops, street scene. So, I spend quite a lot of time explaining perspective. I try to find how to find the vanishing point and, all the important things, and to get the perspective right. Even they understand, but when it comes to drawing that, they make mistakes. So I think, the drawing and the values and two most common areas that I find myself correcting them often.
So do you lay in perspective lines and then erase them out later?
I do, but erasing I don't, because one thing, I don't mind seeing pencil lines. I consider pencil lines a part of my work. So although I had a couple collectors who asked me after they purchased my paintings that they wanted me to erase those lines, but most of the time I don't mind. But also, as I said before, my drawing, I put in pencil lines as guidelines where I see contrast. So knowing that those lines will be covered with the darks. So actually, even if I don't erase my drawing at the end of my painting, most of the lines are covered, so you don't really see them. So no need to erase. And then going back to your question, the perspective lines, yes, I after I find the vanishing point, I draw several lines out of it, but not too many, only the important ones.
Right. And one thing that I found in looking at your work is your compositions are wonderful. You have a very good feel for composition. Can you share some thoughts on composition and what makes a great painting? Is that possible to do verbally?
I can, I will try. And thank you so much for saying good things about my composition, because that's something I try to improve on, and then I always think that's one of my important things, and always tell my students a few things that you really need to decide or think very carefully about before you begin the composition and then design. So, I really appreciate your kind words. Well, the focal point, I think it's important to have in your painting. So that 1/3 rule is quite useful. And although sometimes I put the focal point right in the middle to see if it works. So I try to place the focal point, keeping that 1/3 rule in mind. So after that, I try to design other elements around the focal point. So just by doing that, I think your painting would look nice. But of course, it's not the only thing. I think if it's a landscape, usually you have 3 planes: foreground, midground, and background. And I think it's important to choose one as a dominant shape, so you won't divide the paper into equally 3 parts. So give dominance to one of the planes, and also the contrast. The value, because value is always something I think about. So I try to create that light, dark contrast, strong contrast, and around the focal point first, and then rest of the painting, but not too much to the edge of the paper. So there's all the nice contrasted areas are sort of concentrated in the middle. But since I try to keep the horizon not in the middle, either lower or higher, so I think, depending on the decision, the volume that I give to the painting with the many contrasts will be another, not really, that doesn't create the symmetry. So I try many different things and to create a nice composition. But the focal point is being the most important thing I think of.
What is it about a subject matter that speaks to you and says, I have to do a painting at this particular spot? How do you choose your subjects?
How do I choose a subject? I usually say to anybody who asks me this question, I don't choose a subject. That means I let it choose me, and because I'm outside most of the time, maybe 85 to 90% of the time I'm painting outside. I just arrive at a location, or I just see while driving something that seems to be a nice spot to paint. So I stand there and without really thinking what I would paint. And then what I would do is just look around me without really looking hard for a possible subject, try to take it all in and then try to get the feel of the place by maybe seeing the light and by understanding the color feel, by just letting the whole atmosphere talk to me. At this point, I'm not really thinking what I would paint. So after doing that for maybe a few minutes, and usually something clicks inside my head, and I know that's when I have found my subject. And then I try to, consciously think what it is. And well, usually it's because what I like to do in my work is to capture light and a certain atmosphere, but usually the contrast and, the light-dark contrast, or sometimes it's subtle, or the mood and the whole place creates. And so I try not to think too much what would I would paint. I'd like to take time and let it talk to me, let the environment talk to me, and then whatever that speaks to me, that will be my subject. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what I do, especially when I'm outside.
And you're doing a lot of teaching. I think I saw that you were doing about 20 workshops a year. How do you keep up with all that?
Yes, I do many workshops, especially from March to November. I'm constantly on the road teaching, from one workshop to another. And I do like it. This is not something I feel I have to do. And I think it's because my father was a professor. And then growing up in Japan, I come from a very small family. He was the only person working. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And then my father was the only person working in the outside world. And so I remember when I was in elementary school, I wrote an essay, and I said, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. So I was interested in teaching as a profession, although I never thought I would be teaching painting. So this is something totally unexpected, but I do love teaching. So this is, another of my dreams, and that it came true. So doing teaching and painting at the same time, and also traveling and together with it, and it's just fantastic for me.
Well, I'm going to have to take one of your workshops one of these days. You gave me a lesson. You were at the PleinAir convention, and we were at the Sennelier booth. I assume that's the paint you use. And
oh yes,
yeah,
we painted together. Yes,
yeah, we painted together,
and that was a brief. And
I've done watercolor before, but not much and not well, and I proved that in that particular case. But it was kind of fun to paint together.
Oh no, that was just for fun, and I just doodle too.
So talk to me about paper. How important is paper in watercolor? I assume it's probably really crucial.
Oh, yes. And to me, I always tell my students, if you're going to invest in art materials and paper, that's the most important thing. if you use low quality paper or student grade paper, it's very hard to make a decent painting on it. So to me, the paper is the most important thing. My preference is, of course, professional grade, and then of course, I'm sure you know that there are few types of surface in the watercolor paper. The smooth paper, and then a little texture or more texture. I like a little bit texture on my paper, so that some of the techniques and like dry brush technique work very well, and not so much on a smooth paper. So I prefer texture paper, and 100% cotton, and that's another important thing, and also each paper is very different, reacts very differently. So I think it's very important for each artist to try, if they can, and different papers, and to find that one that works for them. I did that too, and then I arrive at the one I'm using. So I think the paper is the most important thing.
Do you want to talk to us about what brand you're using?
Yes, I use mainly Arches. It's a French paper. Arches rough, and that's what I use and I travel with. And also I have a few other favorites, Waterford, Saunders, and Fabriano, and Winsor Newton. They're all my favorite, and I wouldn't mind any one of them.
Excellent. Well, this has been wonderful. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I just want to say that as an artist, although this is the life I didn't envision that I would have at this point in my life, and that all the things that have been happening, and since the day one as an artist, just amazing. It's been an incredible journey already, and so of course there are ups and downs, and like anything else, but this is really, really, really incredible. The kind of people I meet, and also being able to do what I love, and then there are people who appreciate it, and then also I can share with this passion, and that's wonderful. So I think anybody who out there and trying to be an artist or want to be an artist, I would love to encourage them to dive in. Of course, there are some things that we have to think about, and like marketing, like we talked about. So there are some practical matters we need to take care of. But this is the wonderful, the community, I think, worldwide. And no matter where you go, you meet artists and people who appreciate art. This is a wonderful place to be in. So I would like to encourage everybody who's interested in to give it a try.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Keiko, for taking the time and being on the PleinAir podcast today.
Thank you so much, Eric, for having me.
Thank you again to Keiko Tanabe, just a fantastic artist.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, which you can email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com, or we got a bunch of them left over from our stage presentation of marketing. We do 3 mornings of marketing at the PleinAir convention. We had a lot of questions we weren't able to get to. So here's one of them. It's a question from Sharon Bamber of Nacups, British Columbia. I probably said that wrong. Sharon paints pastels and she sells online, wants to know, should she be selling her art framed or unframed? Well, of course, the easy answer is however it's going to sell is the best way to sell it. I am a big believer in spending money on quality frames. Frames make paintings look even better. They present a great image. And if you want to make a painting feel more expensive, put it in a better frame. And it really does a big job. You can make a big difference in the presentation of a painting in person in a gallery if it's in a great frame. The galleries will tell you, most galleries will tell you that if they've oftentimes taken a painting, put it in a new and better frame, and it's sold immediately, and sometimes at a higher price. I've got a story about that in my book where we talk about framing and the importance of framing. So I think, you have to keep in mind that you want to control the environment. If you show your painting in a frame online, if that's what you're doing, I think that's probably a great way to do it, because then they can envision it. And it would even be nice to show that painting in a frame hanging in a room so they could envision it in a room. That's a nice thing to do. So you might be able to pull that off. And so if you can do that, great. People judge your painting for the whole package, and you don't want to send a painting to somebody and have them have to figure out how to get it framed and not be able to have that instant gratification. It's going to sit somewhere until they get to the store to get it framed, and they might choose a crummy frame and it might not look good. So the best thing you can do is to try to help them. Of course, you're going to have to get more money for that frame, but that's okay. I think people would expect it. It's an option you can give. You can also offer, of course, to have a dark frame, a gold frame, a different kind of frame, glass, no glass, etc. There's a lot of options for you. So just consider that. I guess if you're doing pastel, you probably want to do glass, right? So anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. The next question from Steph Lord of Chicago. Steph said, at PACE, the Plein Air convention, during Art Marketing Boot Camp, you talked about the importance of marketing via a newsletter. If I'm starting out, can I and should I buy a list of names to send to send the newsletter to, direct mail to? Well, this is a complex subject. First off, the reason you want to do a newsletter is because you want to stay top of mind with people all the time, and having a good monthly excuse to do that is great. The problem with email newsletters, everybody's doing them. Now, some of them get through, some of them don't, but most newsletters tend to be all about me. Look at me, look at what I'm doing, look at how great I am, and that's kind of boring, sorry. But if you can make it more interesting, making it about them, then that'll help a lot. In our Art Marketing in the Box product, which is a kind of a year of promotions of what am I trying to say? We have a year of promotions of emails, we have year of promotions of newsletters, and we have postcards and so on. They're all pre-written, and the people that are using those consistently are getting really good results. And they're written in a way so that it's entertaining and enlightening to people, so it's not just all about you. Of course, you have to make it about you at some point. You want to talk about your paintings and so on, but you've got to get them wanting to read it. So I think this is a really good question. The first thing you want to do is you want to build a list. You want to build your own list in your own way. A list is very important, and you want to consider those names to be very valuable to you. And so you might be willing to offer some kind of an incentive to get a name, but you don't necessarily want to go out and buy a list of names. Now, people in the direct marketing business do this all the time, but you've got to find somebody who's interested in a product. If you ended up with a list of names of people who didn't like or buy art, then that's not going to do you any good. And so if you're going to buy a list of people in your community who are known to have maybe frequented a certain art gallery or certain types of art galleries. You can actually buy the list of people who bought art from American Express. You know, you have to pay a lot of money for that list, but so you could pick out the galleries that they bought from, and if they're the type of art you do, then that could be a positive thing. But if they're, of course, you're doing traditional art and they're doing modern art, you probably don't want to approach those buyers because they're not likely to buy. But the best thing is build your own list. People are going to respond better if they know you already. They've met you at an art show, they met you at a community event, maybe a charity event. You get their, you give them your card, you get their card, you ask if you can put them on the list. You know, you don't have to have a lot of people. It's the idea of frequency that sells people, you know, repetition, time and time and time again. And you may think it's too much, but over time, it really works to bring them on board and buy paintings. And of course, we've got all these special little promotions we do in our thing that kind of gives an excuse to talk about how to get a painting for Valentine's Day or for Christmas or a birthday or something like that. So you want to direct mail people who know you, build your list that way. You can also do this incentive, as I mentioned earlier. I talk a lot about what we call lead magnets. I talk about them in my book, Make More Money Selling Your Art. And the idea is you give them something valuable, perceived to be valuable, that they want in exchange for their email address. And you see this all the time. You know, somebody will say, well, here's a free ebook, or here's a free something. You know, they're trying to get you to give them the email address. And that's so that you can send them further things about you, including your newsletter. So you could say, hey, here's an ebook on my 20 best paintings. Sign up for it, and I'll send you my newsletter. And that's a good way to get your newsletter out there. And of course, if you have a way you can capture their physical address, then do that. You know, for instance, they're not going to give you their physical address, probably, just for an ebook. But if you say, hey, thanks for signing up for my ebook. If you'd like a set of postcards, or if you'd like a print of one of my pieces of work, give me your address and I'll drop one in the mail to you, then they'll give you their address. And then you have the ability to send something to them time and time again. It might stimulate interest. Anyway, you want a qualified list, and that's the best way to become an effective marketer. Hope that's helpful. Today's podcast, sponsored by the PleinAir Convention. It's the world's largest plein air event taking place in San Francisco and Painting and Wine Country, too. This coming April, we're going to paint some amazing places. We've got some top instructors, some of the best painters in the world coming in. Mark D'Alessio, an incredible painter, coming over from Florence, Italy to teach you how to paint. This guy is one of the top plein air painters in the world. Joe McGurl, Joseph Buckvick from Australia coming in. I mean, where else can you get 80 instructors coming in to teach you, so you have a choice of 4 stages, and you can spend 2 or 3 days learning and get all this stuff. There just is nothing like it in the world. And we hope you'll come. Check it out at pleinairconvention.com. Also check out our new publication, American Watercolor, with Kelly Kane, former editor of Watercolor Artist Magazine, doing a beautiful job. You can check it out at americanwatercolor.net and subscribe to it. It comes for free. It's americanwatercolor.net. Also, I have a blog that I do on Sunday mornings. You can sign up to get it. It's all about stuff and things, not so much about art, but once in a while. It's called Sunday Coffee. It's just kind of my thoughts on life. Anyway, you can find it coffeewitheric.com. Well, this is always fun. Let's do it again sometime. How about next week? I'll see you then. My name is Eric Rhodes. I'm the publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine, and I am absolutely passionate about plein air painting, and I hope that you are too. I hope you find it. I hope you discover it. If you haven't tried it, I hope you'll try it. I've actually got some free lessons online too. You can go to paintbynote.com. It's a kind of a new concept I came up with to help learn to paint. So if you haven't tried to paint, that's a good way to start, paintbynote.com. We'll see you next week, and it's a big world out there. Go paint it. Bye-bye.